Chapter 1. The Unusual Will. Rain pounded relentlessly against the window of the law office, droplets streaking down the glass as if trying to drown the entire city of New York in a misty haze. Julian Thorne sat stiffly in a leather chair, his deep blue eyes locked on the will spread out before him. The words were printed clearly, crisply, but to him they seemed to dance on the page, mocking him. A significant portion of his grandfather, Henry Thorne's massive estate, the man who had built Thorne Enterprises from the ground up, was left to a complete stranger, Ella Monroe. "Who is Ella Monroe?" Julian asked, his voice cold, though a storm raged beneath the surface. He leaned forward, eyes sharp and narrowed at the elderly lawyer across from him, Harold Grayson, who had served the Thorne family for over 3 decades. Harold adjusted his round glasses, his voice steady but cautious. "She's a nurse, Mr. Julian, works at St. Mary's Hospital. Mr. Henry specifically mentioned her in the will." "A nurse?" Julian let out a dry laugh, void of humor. He rose to his feet and walked toward the window, one hand buried deep in the pocket of his tailored slacks. "My grandfather, who trusted no one outside of this family, left millions to some unknown nurse. Is this a joke, Harold?" "It's no joke, sir." Harold opened a file and pulled out a small yellowed envelope sealed with red wax. "This is a handwritten letter from Mr. Henry. He instructed me to deliver it to you only after the will was read." Julian turned, his gaze narrowing. He took the envelope and felt the coarse texture of the paper beneath his fingers. The red wax bore the Thorne family crest, an eagle with outstretched wings that sent a pang through his chest. His grandfather had always taken great pride in that symbol, in the legacy he had built from nothing. So why would he do this? Julian tore the envelope open and unfolded the single sheet inside. His grandfather's strong, familiar handwriting filled just a few lines. "Julian, you are my pride, but you lack faith in people. Ella Monroe is not a stranger. She showed me light in my darkest days. Find her. Don't let prejudice blind your heart." Julian clenched the paper, heat rising in his chest. "Light? Darkest days," he muttered in disbelief. His grandfather, Henry Thorne, was a man of steel, never one to be swayed by emotion, and now he had left over $50 million to a woman Julian had never even heard of. There could only be one explanation. Ella Monroe was a gold digger, someone who had preyed on a vulnerable old man in his final days. "We need to investigate her," Julian said, his tone like a blade. "I want to know everything about Ella Monroe, who she is, what she did to my grandfather, and why he made this insane decision." Harold sighed, the weight of age and experience in his eyes. "Mr. Julian, I urge you to be careful. Mr. Henry was not easily fooled. Perhaps there's something you don't yet understand." "Don't understand?" Julian's lips curled into a cold smile. "I understand perfectly. People like her always find a way to worm their way into wealthy families. Maybe she put on the perfect act, but I'll expose her." He stormed out of the office, his polished leather shoes echoing across the marble floor. The rain still poured, but inside Julian, a fire had been lit, a fire of suspicion and determination. Whoever Ella Monroe was, she wasn't going to get away with it. He would find the truth, and if she was indeed a manipulator, he would make sure she paid. As the elevator doors slid shut, Julian pulled out his phone and dialed his personal assistant. "Find me everything on a nurse named Ella Monroe at St. Mary's. I want to know what she has for breakfast." He ended the call, eyes flashing with cold resolve. But deep down, a small flickering question lingered. If grandfather trusted her, was there something he had missed? You're watching Soul Stories, where every tale whispers of love, healing, and hope. If you believe that even the smallest act of kindness can change a life, and that love often arrives when we least expect it, don't forget to subscribe and be part of our journey. Now stay with us. The story is just beginning. Chapter 2. The Mysterious Girl and Her Sick Brother. Julian Thorne had never stepped foot in the Lower East Side, a neighborhood of narrow streets, musty smells, and the distant wail of ambulance sirens. He adjusted his tie, feeling out of place in his Armani suit amidst the old buildings with graffiti-stained walls. His assistant, Marcus, had texted him Ella Monroe's address, a small apartment on the third floor of a rundown tenement building. She lives here? Julian muttered, eyes sweeping across a line of people waiting at a nearby food truck that served free meals. If Ella really was a gold digger, she was playing a remarkably clever hand. He pushed open the heavy iron door, the rusted hinges groaning like a warning. The rotting wooden stairs creaked beneath his every step, and the stale stench of old cigarettes clung to the air. At apartment 3B, Julian paused, drawing a deep breath. He had decided to pose as a legal assistant from Grayson and Associates to approach Ella. If she was running a scam, he needed proof, and he wouldn't let emotions cloud his judgment. He knocked 3 times, the sound flat and sharp. A moment later, the door cracked open, revealing a pair of large, warm brown eyes. The woman standing there was petite, her blonde hair pulled into a simple ponytail. She wore a worn sweater and faded jeans. No makeup, no jewelry, nothing like the gold digger he had imagined. Yes, her voice was gentle but wary. I'm Ethan Carter, from Grayson and Associates, Julian replied smoothly, flashing the polite smile he had perfected in million-dollar negotiations. I'm here to discuss Mr. Henry Thorne's will. Ella's eyes widened, not with excitement, but with panic. The will? I already told Mr. Grayson. I don't want anything from the Thorne family. She stepped back, starting to close the door, but Julian quickly stopped it with his hand. This will only take a few minutes, Miss Monroe. It's a legal matter of importance. He kept his tone calm, but inside, he was analyzing her every expression. Was that panic genuine, or just an act? Ella hesitated, then gave a reluctant nod. Fine, but please be quick. I have things to do. She opened the door wider, revealing a small, cramped apartment, surprisingly clean. An old sofa sat by the window, stacked with medical textbooks. In one corner was a fold-out bed, and on it lay a boy around 10 years old. He was pale, eyes closed, a faint beeping coming from the heart monitor beside him. Julian paused. Is he? My brother Liam, Ella said softly, her tone shifting as she looked at the boy. He has a congenital heart defect. Today's not a good day. She stepped over, gently adjusting the thin blanket over Liam's body with the care of someone handling fragile glass. Julian watched, a strange tightness forming in his chest. The scene, a struggling girl caring for her sick brother, was almost too perfect, as if staged. He'd seen similar tactics in court cases, heart-tugging narratives crafted to manipulate sympathy. Yet the way Ella looked at Liam, the slight tremble in her hand, made him hesitate. Was this an act, or was it real? We can talk over here, Ella gestured to a small wooden table near the kitchen, where a kettle was whistling. Would you like something to drink? I only have bagged tea. No, thank you, Julian replied, settling into a wobbly wooden chair. He pulled out a fake set of documents, making sure the Grayson and Associates logo was visible. Miss Monroe, Mr. Henry Thorne's will left you a large sum, over $50 million. Do you know why? Ella sat across from him, her hands wrapped around a steaming mug of tea, the rising vapor misting her eyes. I don't know. I was just his nurse at the nursing home. I took care of him, like I do all my patients. I don't understand why he'd do that. Julian raised a brow. You took care of my grandfather. Did you ever speak to him privately? Try to convince him of something? Ella's brows furrowed, a flash of anger in her eyes. Are you implying that I took advantage of a dying man for money? I didn't want Mr. Henry's money, and I still don't. Liam needs me, not millions of dollars I don't deserve. Her words were sharp, but Julian didn't flinch. You say you don't want the money, yet you're the beneficiary. If you don't intend to accept it, what will you do? Formally refuse it? Yes, Ella answered firmly. I'll sign whatever papers are needed to decline it. I don't want to be part of this. Your family can keep the money. Julian tilted his head, studying her. She refused too quickly, too decisively. Was it arrogance hiding a scheme, or the truth? He decided to push further. Miss Monroe, turning down $50 million is no small thing. Your brother needs care, doesn't he? That money could pay for hospital bills, medicine, even surgery. Ella stiffened. Her gaze flicked to Liam, then back to Julian. I'll find a way. I always have. I don't need someone else's money to save my brother. Her voice trembled, not from weakness, but from fierce determination. "Mr. Carter, if that's all, please leave. I need to be with Liam." Julian rose, feeling as if he'd walked into a chess game without understanding the rules. He nodded, placing a fake business card on the table. "If you change your mind, call me. That's the office number." As the door closed behind him, Julian stood in the dim stairwell, mind spinning. Ella Monroe didn't look like a gold digger. She lived in poverty, cared for a sick sibling, and rejected a fortune most would kill for. And yet, that very perfection made him suspicious. No one turned down $50 million without a reason. What was she hiding? He stepped outside. The rain had stopped, leaving glistening puddles on the sidewalk. His phone buzzed, a text from Marcus. "Found background on Ella Monroe. Been a nurse at St. Mary's for 3 years. No criminal record, no debt. But here's something odd. She took a 3-month leave with no explanation, right when Mr. Henry was admitted to the nursing home." Julian tightened his grip on the phone, eyes narrowing. 3 months, he murmured. Plenty of time to build a connection, or a scheme. He decided to keep tracking Ella, under the guise of a legal assistant. If she was acting, he'd make sure she slipped. But as he climbed into the waiting Bentley, the image of Ella's brown eyes, worried yet resilient, lingered in his mind. For the first time, Julian felt a flicker of doubt. Not about Ella, but about his own judgment. Chapter 3. The Distorted Truth. Light from the massive glass windows on the 48th floor of Thorne Enterprises spilled across Julian Thorne's expressionless face. He sat at the head of the conference table, hands clasped tightly, eyes sweeping over the 10 board members who stared back at him with a mix of anticipation and growing impatience. The atmosphere in the sleek boardroom, lined with walnut paneling and anchored by a towering LED screen, was as heavy as a courtroom. At the center of the table lay a copy of his grandfather Henry Thorne's will, sitting there like a silent accusation. "Julian, we need to act now," said Eleanor Caldwell, the board's most senior member. Her voice was sharp, her eyes behind gold-rimmed glasses gleaming with authority. "This story about the nurse is spreading across financial forums. If we don't get ahead of it, Thorne Enterprises stock will take a hit. What do you want shareholders to think? That the Thorne family allowed a gold digger to manipulate Henry's legacy?" Julian clenched his hands, nails digging into his palms. The image of Ella Monroe in that run-down apartment flashed through his mind, her steady but anxious gaze as she spoke of her sick brother. He had met her just 2 days ago, and though he still had doubts, he couldn't deny she didn't fit the mold of a gold digger. But the board didn't care about his instincts. They only cared about numbers and reputation. "I understand," Julian replied, his voice low but firm. "But we don't have concrete evidence that Miss Monroe is a fraud. She's already refused the inheritance." A scoff echoed from the end of the table. Vincent Marlowe, a smug young investor, leaned on one elbow, smirking. "Refused? That's just a tactic, Julian. She knows accepting the money too soon would expose her. She's playing the long game. I propose we launch a media campaign, label her the gold digger nurse, and force her out before this becomes a scandal." Julian's stomach twisted. A media campaign. He knew the power of sensational headlines, of paid press coverage, of how the media could twist the truth until it became unrecognizable. He'd used those tactics himself to crush competitors. But this time, the target was a nurse living in poverty, caring for a sick child. Something about it felt wrong. "Miss Monroe has no criminal record, no debt, and she's declined the inheritance," Julian said, keeping his voice as neutral as possible. "If we go after her without proof, it could backfire." Eleanor arched an eyebrow, her gaze sharp as a blade. "Backfire? Julian, you're the CEO of Thorne Enterprises. Your job is to protect your grandfather's legacy, not the feelings of some anonymous girl. We've already hired a PR firm. They're ready to release the first article tonight. Poor nurse or calculated opportunist? You just need to give the green light." Julian looked down at the will again. His grandfather's words echoed in his mind. "Don't let prejudice blind your heart." He wanted to believe Ella Monroe was a fraud, that she manipulated his grandfather into rewriting the will. But the way she refused the money, the fierce way she spoke about her brother, haunted him. If she was innocent, This campaign would destroy her life. If she was guilty, his hesitation could damage the family name. Fine, Julian said at last, his voice so low it was nearly a whisper. Run the article, but I want to oversee the content. No excessive embellishments. Vincent smiled triumphantly. Eleanor nodded in approval. Good. We'll give her a week to show her true colors. If she takes the money, she proves us right. If she doesn't, public pressure will crush her anyway. The meeting adjourned, and Julian walked onto the balcony of the Thorne Enterprises tower. The New York skyline sparkled beneath him, city lights like scattered stars. He pulled out his phone and opened an email from Marcus, his assistant. Attached was a new report on Ella. She had worked at the same nursing home where his grandfather had passed, and during the final 3 months of his life, she had been the only one Henry specifically requested to care for him. There were no records of her receiving gifts or money from him. But what stopped Julian cold was one simple line. Monroe regularly volunteers, providing free medical aid to underprivileged children. He locked his phone, a wave of unease rising in his chest. Volunteer work? Another manipulation? Or something genuine? He recalled her trembling voice when she spoke of Liam, her eyes as she refused the money. What am I doing? Julian muttered, gripping the railing tight. That night, the article was published in a well-known tabloid, The Mystery Nurse Who Inherited Millions from Billionaire Henry Thorne. The article painted Ella as a poor, sweet-faced nurse, but with heavy insinuations that she had charmed Henry to gain access to his fortune. A blurry photograph of Ella, snapped outside St. Mary's Hospital, appeared on the front page with the caption, Angel or Opportunist? Julian sat alone in his dark office, the glow from his laptop casting shadows across his face. He scrolled through the online comments. Vicious accusations, wild theories. Classic gold digger, one person wrote. She definitely slept with the old man for the money, another posted. Every word felt like a knife to his conscience. He told himself this was necessary to protect the family. So why did it feel like betrayal? His phone buzzed. A message from Marcus. Miss Monroe called Grayson and Associates. She asked to meet with Ethan Carter to sign the formal waiver. She says she wants to be left alone. Julian stared at the message, a painful tightness gripping his chest. She still wanted to give up the inheritance, even under attack from the media. He stood abruptly, grabbed his coat, and called his driver. Get the car. I need to go to the Lower East Side now. As the Bentley rolled through the dim streets, Julian felt a storm building inside him. He was going to meet Ella, still posing as Ethan Carter, to finalize the paperwork. But deep down, he knew it wasn't just about the documents. He needed to look her in the eye. He needed to know, was she truly the woman his grandfather had trusted, or just a masterful liar? And for the first time, Julian feared the answer might force him to question everything he believed about her and about himself. Chapter 4. The Cut on Grandfather's Wrist. Ella Monroe's apartment was cloaked in darkness when Julian arrived, the only illumination coming from a dim street lamp casting shadows through the window. He knocked on the door, heart heavy. He carried a folder of falsified documents under the name Ethan Carter, legal assistant. Papers Ella was supposed to sign to officially renounce the inheritance. But after witnessing the media storm he had helped unleash, Julian wasn't sure what he was doing anymore. The door remained silent. He knocked again, louder this time, only to be met with more silence. Ella, he called, his voice hoarse from the icy hallway wind. A neighbor, a frail elderly woman with silver hair wrapped in a worn shawl, peeked out from the apartment next door. She's not here, she rasped. Took the boy to the hospital this afternoon. The kid's not doing well. Julian turned sharply, heart tightening. Which hospital? St. Mary's, the woman said, then shook her head. Poor girl. The media's tearing her apart, and all she cares about is her little brother. Julian said nothing, just gave a nod of thanks and rushed down the stairs, a crushing guilt pressing on his chest. He jumped into his Bentley and ordered the driver straight to St. Mary's. Ella adjusting Liam's blanket, her unwavering eyes as she refused the money. Those images looped relentlessly in his mind. Had he made a mistake letting the board release that article? Or was she still playing the perfect game? St. Mary's was bustling even at night. Julian moved through the disinfectant-scented halls, scanning faces, patients, nurses, doctors, but Ella was nowhere to be found. "She's not on shift today," said a young nurse at the front desk. "But if you're asking about her, you might try St. Agnes Nursing Home. She used to work there. They knew her pretty well." Julian frowned. St. Agnes, the very nursing home where his grandfather, Henry Thorne, had passed away. He had never visited, not wanting to confront the memory of his grandfather's final, frail days. But if that place held answers about Ella, he had no choice. St. Agnes sat on the city's outskirts, a low building with once white walls now tinged yellow with age. Inside, the scent of antiseptic mingled with lavender from small flower pots by the entrance. An elderly man in a wheelchair stared dreamily through the glass at the garden outside. Julian walked to the reception desk and introduced himself as Ethan Carter, investigating matters regarding Henry Thorne's estate. "Ella? Oh, she's an angel," said Martha, the receptionist, her smile warm. "She doesn't work here anymore, but we all still talk about her. If you want the real story, speak with Mr. Walter. He was very close to Mr. Henry." Julian was led to a quiet garden behind the facility, where an old man sat holding a tattered book. His eyes were cloudy, but sharpness remained in his gaze. "You're Julian, aren't you?" Walter asked, his voice raspy but firm. "I heard you're asking about Ella Monroe. Well, son, she's special, and if you're here because of Henry's will, then you deserve to know the truth." Julian sat across from him on a wooden bench, trying to keep a neutral expression. "The truth? What do you mean?" Walter inhaled deeply, eyes drifting past Julian as though staring into some distant past. "Henry wasn't an easy man, proud, cold. And after he was diagnosed with cancer, he grew bitter. About 3 years ago, one night, I heard something strange from his room. I wheeled myself over and found Ella inside holding his wrist. He'd tried to take his own life." Julian froze, blood draining from his face. "Suicide?" he whispered, voice trembling. "My grandfather. That's not possible. He was the strongest man I knew." "Strong doesn't mean unbreakable," Walter said quietly. He had used a shard of glass from a broken photo frame. Family photo. Ella found him in time. She wrapped his wrist, sat with him all night. Didn't call a doctor because Henry begged her not to. She just told him, "You're worth more than you think." Julian felt like the air had been punched from his lungs. His grandfather, the man who taught him weakness was unforgivable, had once tried to give up, and Ella, the unknown nurse, had saved him. He tried to steady his voice. "Why didn't she report it? Why does no one know?" "Because Ella respected him," Walter said. "She knew he didn't want his family to see him as a failure. After that night, she was by his side every day. They talked for hours about life, mistakes, about you, Julian." Julian blinked. "Me?" "Yes. Henry said you were his pride, but too much like him. Cold, distrusting. He told Ella he wanted to leave you something more than money, a lesson. Ella nunca pidió nada. When he mentioned changing the will, she resisted, told him she didn't deserve it." Julian sat motionless, thoughts spinning. Each word from Walter chipped away at the wall of assumptions he had built around Ella. But a doubt still lingered. If she was so good, why did she quit right after my grandfather died? Walter shrugged. She was exhausted, caring for Henry and her brother, who's got a heart defect, you know. Ella hardly slept. She left to take the boy for treatment at a specialty hospital. Julian rose to his feet, the ground beneath him seeming to shift. He thanked Walter and stepped out of the garden, mind racing. Ella wasn't just the nurse who had cared for his grandfather. She had saved him, again and again. She'd held him together in his darkest hours. But if she was innocent, what had the media campaign, what had he done to her? Back in the car, Julian's phone buzzed. A message from Marcus. Second article just published. Title, Nurse Turns Down Millions or Just Playing Hard to Get? Ella Monroe spotted at St. Mary's, appears distressed. Julian clenched his phone. His chest felt like it was being ripped in two. He had made a mistake, but how could he fix it? He turned to the driver. Take me to St. Mary's, now. As the Bentley cut through the night, Julian felt a storm gathering in his chest. He was going to find Ella, Not to collect signatures, not to play roles, but to face the truth. And maybe, just maybe, to finally face himself. Chapter 5, Her First Payment. Julian Thorne sat in the back seat of the Bentley, the flickering lights of roadside billboards casting sharp shadows across his chiseled features. His deep blue eyes, usually unreadable, now brimmed with conflict. He had driven straight to St. Mary's Hospital after leaving St. Agnes Nursing Home, his mind still reeling from Walter's revelation. His grandfather, Henry Thorne, had attempted suicide, and the woman Julian had once dismissed as a gold digger, Ella Monroe, had been the one who pulled him back from the edge. But before he could find her, and perhaps face himself, his phone vibrated with a new notification from Marcus. Ella Monroe just accepted a payment from the will. $100,000. New article is going live. Julian's grip tightened on the phone, as if it had delivered a punch to his chest. She took the money, he muttered, his voice laced with anger and disbelief. Part of him had needed to believe she was innocent, that she really was the selfless woman Walter had described. An angel, not a con. But $100,000? That wasn't a small sum, especially for a woman from the slums. He pressed his foot down hard. He had to find Ella, and he had to hear the truth from her lips. St. Mary's was still bustling, even as midnight crept near. Julian moved swiftly through the hallways, scanning faces, searching for the familiar blonde ponytail. At the front desk, he stopped in front of a middle-aged nurse typing behind the counter. "I need to speak with Ella Monroe," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. "She's here, isn't she?" The nurse looked up, irritation flashing in her eyes. "Ella? She was just suspended. If you're a reporter, I suggest you leave. That girl doesn't need more trouble." "Suspended?" Julian frowned. "Why?" With a sigh, the nurse pointed at a gossip rag on the desk. The bold headline screamed, "Poor nurse reveals her true greed, accepts $100,000 from billionaire's will." Below it was a candid photo of Ella leaving the hospital, eyes swollen, face drawn. Julian felt ice flood his veins. He unlocked his phone and scrolled through the latest news. Every outlet echoed the same message. Ella Monroe, the so-called gold digger, had finally shown her true colors. "I'm not a reporter," Julian said, his voice dropping low. "I'm Ethan Carter, Grayson and Associates. Where did she go?" The nurse softened slightly. "She left an hour ago. The hospital director called her in, said she was damaging the hospital's reputation. Poor girl. She just wanted to save her brother." Julian felt his chest tighten. She took the money. But for what? And now she'd lost her job too? He turned and rushed back to his car, calling Marcus as he moved. "Find her. She just left St. Mary's. I need to know where she is." Meanwhile, back in her small Lower East Side apartment, Ella sat on a worn-out couch, hands trembling around a mug of cold tea. In front of her lay a letter from the law office, confirming her acceptance of $100,000 from Henry Thorne's will. She had signed it that morning, moments after doctors told her Liam needed emergency heart surgery. The cost? Nearly $80,000, plus medication and recovery. Ella had spent hours torn between pride and desperation. In the end, she chose to save her brother's life. And in doing so, she knew the world would call her greedy. A sudden knock startled her. She wiped her tears and opened the door. It was Mrs. Rosa, her elderly neighbor, worry etched across her face. "Ella, sweetheart, are you okay? The papers? They're saying horrible things." Ella managed a tired smile, her eyes still red. "I'm fine, Mrs. Rosa. Really, I need a little time." Mrs. Rosa gently took her hand. "You're a good soul, Ella. Don't let them tear you down. Liam needs you strong." Ella nodded, closing the door softly behind her, then collapsed to the floor. She scrolled through headlines. Greedy nurse grabs inheritance. Ella Monroe, angel or opportunist? Each title slashed at her like a blade. She had refused millions, only accepting what she needed to save Liam. But the world didn't care about truth. They only saw a poor girl suddenly holding money, and they judged. Julian found her the next morning, sitting alone on a park bench near her building. The early sunlight filtered through the trees, casting soft shadows across her tired face. Liam was nowhere in sight, likely still at the hospital. Still posing as Ethan Carter, Julian approached with the folder in hand. "Miss Monroe," he said gently. Ella looked up, eyes wary. "Mr. Carter? What now?" "I signed the paperwork. It's done." Julian sat beside her, keeping a respectful distance. "I heard about the suspension and the articles." He paused, searching for words. "Why did you take the money? You said you didn't want anything from the Thorne family." Ella let out a bitter laugh. "Do you think I wanted to?" she whispered. "Liam needs surgery. If I didn't take that money, he would die. I had no other choice." Her voice cracked, and she turned away. "But I guess that doesn't matter to people like you. You got your story. The greedy poor nurse, right?" Julian flinched as if struck. He wanted to explain, to apologize, but his throat tightened. Walter's words echoed in his mind. Ella had saved his grandfather, stood by him, and now Julian himself was part of the machine destroying her. "Ella," he began, but she cut him off. "Don't." She stood, her small frame trembling. "I don't need your pity. I'll take care of Liam. I always find a way. But you and your family, just leave me alone." And with that, she walked away, disappearing into the trees. Julian sat in silence, fists clenched around the folder. He pulled out his phone and reread the newest headline. "Nurse fired after accepting inheritance money." He had been wrong, so painfully wrong. He called Marcus, his voice steely. "Shut down every article about Ella Monroe. Immediately." But deep down, he knew the damage was done. Ella wasn't a gold digger. She was the one who saved his grandfather. And now Julian Thorne had become the man who dragged her to the edge of despair. Still following the story? If this story found you outside of Soul Stories, we invite you home, to where every touching tale begins with truth, hope, and heart. Chapter 6. From Regret to Loneliness. Julian Thorne stood before the door of apartment 3B in the Lower East Side, clutching a wrinkled folder in his hand. Light rain drizzled from the sky, soaking into the shoulders of his suit jacket, but he didn't care. His mind was haunted by the last moment he saw Ella Monroe in the park. Her red, tear-filled eyes, her trembling voice filled with pain and quiet strength. "Just leave me alone," she had said. Those words had carved deep into his heart like a knife. He had been wrong. Wrong to doubt her. Wrong to let the board unleash a media storm that painted her as a gold digger. And now here he was, clinging to the faint hope of making things right, though he had no idea where to begin. He knocked, each thud echoing heavily through the dim corridor. No answer. He knocked harder, calling her name. "Ella, are you in there? It's Ethan Carter." He winced at the name, hating the lie he was still hiding behind. Silence. Then the door next to him creaked open, and Mrs. Rosa, the elderly neighbor, peeked out, her eyes filled with regret. "She's not here anymore, son," she said softly. "She moved out this morning, took the boy to the hospital, said she couldn't stay where reporters kept lurking around." Julian felt the blood drain from his face. "Moved out? Where to?" Mrs. Rosa shrugged, sympathy lining her features. "She didn't say. Just said she needed a quiet place for the boy. Poor thing, getting ripped apart in the news for accepting a little money to save her brother. Who are you to her anyway?" Julian hesitated. Then he whispered, "Someone who owes her an apology." He turned away, unwilling to let Mrs. Rosa see the chaos in his eyes. He descended the stairs slowly, every step heavier than the last. Ella was gone, and he had no idea where to find her. All he had left was the crushing truth. He had helped drive her away. Back on the 48th floor of Thorne Enterprises, Julian slammed his office door shut, rejecting every call from Marcus, his assistant. He collapsed into his leather chair, eyes blank as they stared out at the New York skyline bathed in sunset. On his screen, an email from Vincent Marlowe blinked. "The latest article bumped stock up 3%. Keep going, Julian. We're controlling the narrative." Julian hurled his computer mouse at the wall. The sharp crack echoed through the silence. Controlling the narrative? He controlled nothing. Every headline, every venomous comment about Ella was the result of his decisions. He opened a drawer and pulled out the handwritten letter from his grandfather. Henry Thorne's firm, slanted handwriting stared back at him like an accusation. Don't let prejudice blind your heart. And yet he had. He had let suspicion guide him. And now Ella, the woman who saved his grandfather, who had rejected millions to keep her dignity, was paying the price. He called Marcus, his voice raw. Find Ella Monroe at all costs. I want to know where she is, and I want to know now. I've tried, sir, Marcus replied cautiously. She's not at St. Mary's anymore, and no one in the Lower East Side has seen her. There's a rumor she took her brother to a hospital outside the city, but nothing confirmed. Julian hung up, his hands shaking. He stepped out onto the balcony, letting the freezing wind bite into his skin. He thought of what Walter had said at the nursing home, how Ella had sat up all night with his grandfather after the suicide attempt, how she had respected his wish to keep it a secret, not out of fear, but compassion. She had given Henry Thorne not just care, but meaning in his final days, and Julian had turned her into a pariah. He walked back inside, locked the office door, and canceled every meeting for the week. Tell the board I don't want to see anyone, he told Marcus through the intercom, and don't disturb me unless you have news about Ella Monroe. Days passed. Julian drifted through them in a haze, as though the world outside his office no longer existed. He ignored Eleanor Caldwell's emails demanding approval for new smear campaigns. He deleted Vincent Marlowe's messages boasting that the media strategy was wildly effective. Instead, he sat in the dark, reading every article and comment about Ella, not for damage control, but for any clue that might lead him to her. One evening, he opened his laptop and began researching congenital heart defects, the very illness Liam suffered from. He read about surgeries, recovery risks, crushing costs. He imagined Ella in that rundown apartment, wrestling with herself over the $100,000, knowing it would save her brother, knowing it would destroy her name. The self-disgust was overwhelming. Then his phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Found a lead. Ella was seen at a hospital in Yonkers. About 2 hours out. Registered Liam under a false name, probably to avoid the press. Julian shot to his feet, heart pounding. Yonkers. He didn't know why, but he knew he had to go. Now he grabbed his coat, called for his driver, and plunged into the night. As the Bentley sped down the highway, Julian couldn't stop thinking about Ella. He had called her a manipulator, doubted every word she said, but now he just wanted to find her. Even if it was only to say, I'm sorry. When the car stopped in front of Yonkers General Hospital, Julian stepped out into the cold night, his breath forming wisps in the air. He moved through the sterile corridors asking for a patient named Liam, though he had no idea what alias Ella had used. A young nurse eyed him warily, then finally said, There's a boy who had heart surgery yesterday. His sister's in the waiting room. She signed in as Anna. Julian rushed up the stairs, heart thudding. The third-floor waiting room was nearly empty, except for one small figure curled on a plastic chair. Ella. She wore an old sweater. Her hair was tangled, her eyes hollow, fixed on nothing. She didn't see him at first, but when he approached, she looked up, and her body stiffened instantly. Ella, he said softly, I'm Julian Thorne, not Ethan Carter. I need to talk to you. She shot to her feet, face pale, voice trembling with rage. You, she spat. You're behind all of it, aren't you? The lies, the articles, the headlines. You came to finish what you started? Julian shook his head, the ache in his chest unbearable. I was wrong, Ella. I came to apologize, and I'll do whatever it takes to make it right. But she only stared at him, her expression cracked with pain and exhaustion. Make it right, she whispered. You can't fix what's already lost. And then she turned and walked away, leaving Julian standing alone in the cold waiting room. For the first time in his life, truly alone. Chapter 7. The Mountain Accident. Julian Thorne sat alone in his darkened office, the glow from his phone the only light in the vast room. It had been 2 months since that heartbreaking encounter with Ella at the Yonkers hospital. Her final words, you can't fix what's already lost, still echoed in his mind, a verdict he couldn't escape. He'd tried everything to reach her, emails through the law office, private investigators hired by Marcus, But it was as if Ella Monroe had vanished from the world. She and Liam had disappeared, leaving Julian drowning in an ever-deepening sea of guilt and loneliness. Then his phone buzzed, an incoming message from Marcus. Found Ella Monroe. She's volunteering with a medical relief team in the Adirondack Mountains, helping children in remote areas. But there's bad news. Her team was caught in a rock slide. Status unknown. Julian's heart stopped. A rock slide? He shot to his feet, hands trembling as he called Marcus. Prepare the company helicopter. I need to get to the Adirondacks immediately. Without waiting for a response, he stormed out of his office, consumed by dread. Ella, who had saved his grandfather. Ella, whom he had failed. She was in danger, and he couldn't lose her. Not now. Not before he could make things right. The Thorn Enterprises helicopter touched down near Lake Placid at sunset, the sky bruised with the coming storm. An unexpected blizzard had swept through the mountain range. Wind whipped through the pine forest, icy and merciless. Julian, bundled in a heavy coat and knit cap, stepped onto the snow-covered clearing. A search team was gathered near a rugged mountain trail. A rescue worker with a red, wind-chapped face approached. "Who are you? This area is under emergency lockdown." "I'm Julian Thorne," he replied, voice firm though his pulse raced. "I'm here to find Ella Monroe. She was with the relief group caught in the rock slide." The man's expression darkened. "The landslide hit their convoy 3 hours ago. We found part of their truck crushed by debris. 2 volunteers made it out, but 3, including Monroe and a young boy, are still missing. The blizzards made things worse." Julian's chest tightened. Her brother Liam, he was with her? He pictured the boy's pale face on that fold-out bed, the steady beep of the heart monitor. Ella had risked everything to save him, and now they were both missing. "Take me to the site," Julian said, his voice brooking no argument. The rescue worker hesitated, then nodded. "Fine, but you go with our team. The terrain's dangerous." The storm worsened. Snow fell thick and fast, erasing all signs of the trail. Julian, flanked by 3 rescuers, trudged through the forest, the beam of their flashlights slicing through a wall of white. His hands were frozen despite the gloves, his legs aching, but he didn't stop. He couldn't. "If anything's happened to her," he whispered, "I'll never forgive myself." They reached a narrow ravine where the truck had crashed, its frame half crushed by boulders. One rescuer pointed to faint tracks veering off into the woods. "Looks like they ran toward the forest, maybe to avoid the falling rocks. But if they've been out there too long..." Julian didn't wait for him to finish. He took off into the forest, ignoring the shouted warnings behind him. "Ella!" he called, his voice swallowed by the storm. "Liam!" He climbed over fallen trees, snow soaking through his boots, each step a battle. But still he pressed on, because stopping meant losing them. After nearly an hour of searching, his flashlight caught a glimmer under a dense pine canopy. He ran forward. Beneath the branches, curled beneath a thin emergency blanket, lay Ella, holding Liam tightly against her chest. Both were pale and barely moving. Her lips were blue from cold, her breathing shallow, but she was whispering to Liam, her voice soft, steady. "Save Liam," she croaked as her eyes fluttered open and saw him, her vision blurred. "Please." Julian dropped to his knees, tears stinging his eyes as he pulled off his coat and wrapped it around them both. "I'm here, Ella. I've got you. I'm getting you out of here." He pulled her and Liam close, feeling her fragile body shake against him. For the first time in his life, Julian Thorne wept. Not when his grandfather died, not during billion-dollar deals, but here, holding Ella and Liam in the snow. He couldn't stop the tears. "I'm sorry," he choked. "I'm so sorry for everything." Ella, barely conscious, shook her head. "Liam, save him first." And then she collapsed, her hand still clutching Liam's jacket. Julian shouted for help, voice cracking with panic. The rescue team rushed in, strapping both onto stretchers and covering them with thermal blankets. Julian rode with them, never letting Ella out of his sight, guilt and relief colliding in his chest. At the emergency clinic, both Ella and Liam were rushed into treatment rooms. Julian paced outside, still shaking from cold and emotion. Finally, a doctor emerged. "Liam is stable. He's going to be okay," the doctor said. Ella's suffering from exhaustion and hypothermia, but she'll recover. She stayed conscious just long enough to keep him warm. She didn't stop fighting. Not once. Julian nodded, silent, overcome. Through the glass, he saw Ella lying still on the hospital bed. She looked peaceful now, her face pale but calm. He thought of his grandfather's letter. Ella Monroe was the light in my darkest days. Now he understood. She didn't just save Henry. She had saved him from his own coldness, his prejudice, his blindness. He took out his phone and texted Marcus, "Schedule a press conference. I'm going to tell the world the truth about Ella Monroe." Every word. It would upset the board. It would shake the company. But Julian didn't care. Ella deserved justice. And he, Julian Thorne, was going to give it to her. Not for his legacy, but for her and for himself. Chapter 8, A Public Confession. Julian Thorne stood before the mirror on the 48th floor of Thorne Enterprises, adjusting his tie with hands that still trembled slightly. The light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows cast a sharp glow across his face. His deep blue eyes no longer cold, but resolute. It had been 2 days since he had found Ella and Liam in the blizzard in the Adirondacks. The image of her lying unconscious, clutching her brother with the last of her strength, still haunted him. She had saved his grandfather, saved Liam, and now it was his turn to save her name, even if it meant risking everything. His phone vibrated. A message from Marcus. "The board is furious. Eleanor Caldwell called this press conference career suicide. Vincent Marlowe is demanding it be canceled immediately." Julian smirked bitterly. Let them rage. For the first time, he wasn't acting for profit or legacy. He was doing this because it was right. He stepped out of his office and into the grand conference room, where dozens of reporters were already gathered. Camera lights flashed. Microphones extended forward. All eyes turned to him. Julian walked to the podium, blinking into the glare, but standing tall. He took a deep breath. His voice rang out, clear, steady, and unflinching. "Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Julian Thorne, CEO of Thorne Enterprises. Today I'm here to make something right, a mistake that was mine, and one the media helped perpetuate." The room buzzed. A reporter raised a hand urgently. "Are you talking about Ella Monroe, the nurse who allegedly accepted money from Henry Thorne's will?" Julian nodded, his gaze sharp. "Yes, but let me be very clear. Ella Monroe is not the gold digger the headlines made her out to be. She is a woman of strength, compassion, and honor, and I owe her a public apology." He paused, chest tightening as he recalled Walter's words. Ella keeping vigil beside his grandfather after a suicide attempt, her huddled body in the snowstorm, shielding Liam with her own. "Ella Monroe saved my grandfather's life. When no one else could reach him, when even I had turned away, she sat beside him, listened to him, and gave him peace. She asked for nothing in return. When he left her a portion of his will, she initially refused it. Only later, when her brother's life was on the line, did she accept a small amount to pay for a critical heart surgery." The room fell silent, broken only by camera shutters clicking. Julian pulled a folded page from his pocket and held it up. "My grandfather wrote this before he passed. Ella Monroe was the light in my darkest days. He was right, but I was wrong. I doubted her. I let slanderous headlines tarnish her name. I allowed my own prejudice to blind me, and for that I caused her irreparable harm." Another reporter spoke up, voice skeptical. "But Mr. Thorne, if she was innocent, why did she take the $100,000? Doesn't that prove she had ulterior motives?" Julian gripped the podium, fighting back his rising frustration. "She took that money because she had no other choice. Her little brother needed life-saving surgery. She sacrificed her reputation to save him, and instead of compassion, I, made her a scapegoat. She lost her job, her home, her dignity, all because she wanted to save someone she loved." His eyes swept the room. "Ella Monroe is not a gold digger. She is brave, she is selfless, and she deserves justice. I apologize to her, from the bottom of my heart, for the lies I helped spread. And I ask every media outlet to stop the slander and let her live in peace." A small ripple of applause started from one corner of the room, hesitant but real. Julian didn't feel relief. His apology, no matter how honest, couldn't erase the pain he had caused. He stepped away from the podium, ignoring the barrage of follow-up questions, and left the room. He had said what needed to be said. Now he had to say it where it mattered most. To Ella herself. At Yonkers General Hospital, Ella sat beside Liam's bed, gently running her fingers through his hair. The boy had survived the surgery and was recovering steadily, but her eyes remained fixed on the monitor, as if afraid to look away even for a moment. A nurse entered, holding a tablet. "Ella, you might want to see this," she said, her voice tinged with excitement. "Thorne Enterprises just held a press conference. The CEO, he talked about you." Ella frowned, heart skipping. She took the tablet, pressed play, and Julian's face appeared on screen. His voice was different, vulnerable, honest. As he spoke of his grandfather, the will, the truth she had never told a soul, tears welled up in Ella's eyes. "I apologize to her, from the bottom of my heart." Ella's shoulders trembled. Liam stirred and looked up at her with weak, curious eyes. "Ella, did he mean it? Did he really say he was sorry?" Ella wiped her cheeks. "Maybe," she whispered. "Maybe he did." But even so, it wouldn't change what had been lost. Back at Thorne Enterprises, the atmosphere had shifted. Eleanor Caldwell's voice crackled through the phone, cold and sharp. "You've destroyed everything, Julian. Stock is tanking. The board is calling an emergency meeting to evaluate your position as CEO." "Let them," Julian replied calmly. "I did the right thing, for once in my life." He ended the call before she could speak again. He turned to Marcus. "Any news on Ella?" "She's still in Yonkers," Marcus reported, "but she's not accepting visitors, not even from you." Julian wasn't surprised. He had wounded her deeply, but he wouldn't stop trying. He sat down, pulled out a sheet of stationery, and began writing by hand. Not for the press, not for the board, but for Ella. "Ella, I don't expect your forgiveness. I just want you to know, you changed me. You didn't just save my grandfather. You saved me from the person I was becoming. If there's ever a day when you're ready to talk, I'll be waiting." He sealed the letter and handed it to Marcus with instructions to deliver it to Yonkers General. As the sun dipped low over the city skyline, Julian stood at the window, filled with a quiet that was neither peace nor pain. He had spoken the truth, but would it be enough to bring her back? Chapter 9. Return with Faith. The gentle light of early autumn filtered through crimson maple leaves in the suburbs of Yonkers, casting a warm glow across Ella Monroe's face. She stood before a newly renovated building with a modest but dignified sign, "Monroe Care," written in elegant yet bold lettering. Once an abandoned community center, this place had been transformed into a free clinic for the underserved. A dream Ella had never dared to believe could come true. She smoothed the front of her white blouse, taking a deep breath as her heart raced, equal parts joy and nerves. Today was the opening day, and the person who had made it possible was none other than Julian Thorne, the man who had once shaken her life to its core. 3 months had passed since Julian's public apology. After standing in front of cameras to clear her name and offer a heartfelt atonement, he had shown up at Yonkers General with a handwritten letter. At first, Ella had refused to meet him, her heart still bruised from the media storm that had nearly broken her. But the letter changed something. "You didn't just save my grandfather. You saved me from myself." It was quiet, honest, and vulnerable. And so one quiet afternoon, with Liam stable and recovering, she agreed to see him. For the first time, they spoke not as accuser and accused, but as two people trying to mend what had been shattered. Julian stood at the back of the main hall at Monroe Care, his eyes never leaving Ella as she cut the ceremonial ribbon. The small crowd, nurses, volunteers, a few local reporters, erupted into applause. Ella, radiant but still a little shy, stepped up to the microphone. "Monroe Care isn't just a clinic," she said, her voice clear but emotional. "It's a place where everyone, rich or poor, is treated with compassion. I hope it becomes a light for those who are lost in the dark." Julian's chest tightened. He remembered holding her in the snowstorm, realizing how precious she truly was. After the press conference, Thorne Enterprises had faced its own blizzard. Plummeting stock, board members threatening to oust him. But Julian hadn't flinched. He negotiated with shareholders, restructured key projects, and slowly stabilized the company. More importantly, he stood by Ella, not just with funding, but with presence, with intention. After the ceremony, as the crowd dispersed, Julian approached Ella with 2 cups of coffee. "You did it," he said with a soft smile. "Monroe Care is a testament to your heart." Ella looked at him, her gaze still a little guarded, but no longer cold. "I didn't do this alone," she replied. "You helped make this real." She paused, then added, "I don't know if I've forgiven you, but you've changed. I can feel it." Julian nodded, something easing inside him. "I'm not asking for forgiveness, Ella. I just want to be here, to keep doing what's right. For you, for what my grandfather believed in." In the weeks that followed, Ella and Julian began working side by side, not just at Monroe Care, but on other outreach projects. Ella returned to nursing, running free clinics and outreach events for underserved children. The media once vicious, now called her a symbol of compassion. New articles praised her resilience. Photos of her and Liam at Monroe Care became icons of hope. But Ella didn't let the praise distract her. She remained humble, committed, and focused. Julian, too, transformed. He became a constant presence in her mission, leveraging Thorne Enterprises to supply medical equipment, fund services, and organize mobile clinics. They spent late nights sorting paperwork, packing supplies, and then slowly sharing more than just tasks. One evening, as moonlight spilled through the clinic windows, they sat outside on a wooden bench in the garden. The air was crisp, but neither wanted to leave. "You know," Julian said quietly, "I used to think I had everything figured out. Money, power, success. But you showed me what actually matters." Ella sonrió, su primera sonrisa desprotegida en meses. "And you showed me that people can change, Julian. I didn't believe that before." He looked at her, his heart pounding. He wanted to reach for her hand, to tell her what he felt had grown far beyond gratitude. But he simply smiled back, letting the moment rest, patient, deep, and real. Their connection was growing, not rushed, but rooted in trust and understanding. A month later, at a charity event hosted at Monroe Care, Julian and Ella stood side by side, handing out medical kits to children. The press was present, but this time, not for scandal. A reporter approached. "Ms. Monroe, Mr. Thorne, the two of you have become a beloved duo. Is there something more between you?" Ella enrojeció, mirando a Julian. He chuckled and answered, "We're partners, in service and in purpose. As for the future, who knows?" He winked, and Ella let out a laugh, the kind that warmed him all the way through. That night, after the event, Julian took her hand and led her to the small garden behind the clinic. "Ella," he said seriously, "I can't promise you the world, and I know you don't want that, but I can promise to stand by your side, to build something meaningful, together." She looked at him, her eyes glimmering in the moonlight. "Then stay," she whispered. "That's all I need." They stood there hand in hand, not a perfect couple, but two imperfect people who had found each other through pain, redemption, and grace. And together, they would write a new story. One built on compassion and trust restored. You're watching Soul Stories, exclusive to our channel. If you're still with us, drop a comment. We read and cherish them all. Subscribe to support more heartfelt original stories. Thanks for being part of the Soul Stories family. Chapter 10, The Garden Wedding. Autumn in Vermont painted the small garden of St. Agnes Nursing Home in rich golds and blazing reds, maple leaves twirling gently in the crisp, clean air. Ella Monroe stood quietly at the garden's edge, a bouquet of lavender in her hands, its soft purple blossoms catching the light like something sacred. This was the flower Henry Thorne had loved, the flower she used to bring to his bedside while he shared stories of regrets, legacy, and his fear that his grandson might one day lose his heart to the coldness of power. Now the garden wasn't just a memory, it was a beginning. Ella wore a simple white dress, elegant but unpretentious, that hugged her petite frame with grace. Her makeup was minimal, just a touch of rose on her lips, but her smile outshone anything she could have worn. Today was her wedding day, the day she would become the wife of Julian Thorne, the man who had once doubted her, once hurt her, but who had also stood before the world to defend her name and given his whole heart to redemption. 6 months had passed since the opening of Monroe Care. In that time, Ella and Julian had become inseparable. They organized mobile clinics, distributed medicine, and brought hope to communities long forgotten. Julian, once the archetype of a cold, calculating CEO, now rolled up his sleeves in modest button-downs, handing out medical kits and kicking soccer balls with children. Ella remained the same at her core, humble, devoted, always putting Liam first. 2 months ago, Julian had brought her back to the garden at St. Agnes. Under an old maple tree, sunlight filtering through the canopy, he knelt with a small silver ring in hand. No diamond, just a simple inscription, "My light." "Ella Monroe," he said, voice trembling but sure, "you didn't just save my grandfather. You didn't just save Liam. You saved me from loneliness, from everything I once was. I won't promise you the world, because I know you don't want that, but I promise to love and cherish you for the rest of my life. Will you marry me?" Tears shimmered in her eyes. "Yes, Julian," she whispered. "Not for wealth, not for name, but because I've seen who you truly are." They embraced beneath a tree as lavender petals floated on the breeze. The garden, it seemed, bore witness to vows not yet spoken, vows rooted in forgiveness and honest love. Their wedding was held right there, simple, heartfelt, and small. Only a few people were invited. Liam, now thriving post-surgery, darted between rows of chairs, playing with children from Monroe Care. Mrs. Rosa, Ella's steadfast neighbor, Mr. Walter from the nursing home, beaming from his wheelchair, and Marcus, Julian's loyal assistant and now their dear friend. There were no cameras, no headlines, just birdsong, laughter, and rustling leaves. Ella walked the leaf-strewn aisle, hand in hand with Liam, who clutched her tightly in pride. Julian stood waiting in a charcoal gray suit, eyes never leaving her. When she reached him, he took her hand and whispered, "You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, Ella." The ceremony was officiated by a local pastor who had once known Henry Thorne. He spoke of the garden as a place of healing and second chances. When it came time for their vows, Julian spoke first. "Ella," he said, voice steady and full, "I used to live for reputation, for control, but you've taught me that life's most precious currency is trust and love. I vow to protect you, walk with you, and love you, not just today, but always." Tears slid down Ella's cheeks as she answered, "Julian, you've shown me that even the deepest mistakes can lead us somewhere beautiful. I vow to stand by your side through every joy and every storm, not for anything except the love we've built." They exchanged rings. The small crowd erupted into applause. And from the front row, Liam yelled, "Ella, Julian, you're superheroes!" Laughter rang out like bells. Julian leaned down and kissed her. Soft, reverent, infinite. After the ceremony, guests gathered around a humble reception table under the trees. There were homemade cookies, warm apple cider, and gentle music drifting from a tiny speaker. Mr. Walter lifted a glass of cider and toasted, "Henry would be proud of you, son, and of her. She gave you a heart." Julian smiled, squeezing Ella's hand. He was right. Ella is my light. He turned to her, eyes shimmering, "And I'll never let that light fade." Ella se lavó, pero su agarre en su mano se apretó. "We'll keep it burning together, Julian, for Liam, for Monroe Care, and for everyone who needs us." As the sun dipped low, casting golden-orange hues over the garden, the couple stood side by side, watching Liam laugh with other children. They weren't a perfect couple, not heroes in the world's eyes, but in that garden, where Henry's story ended and theirs began, they had found something lasting, not built on wealth, not forged in fame, but anchored in truth, kindness, and light. That night, after the guests had gone, Julian and Ella sat on the wooden bench beneath the stars. "You know," Julian said, his voice low and warm. "I used to believe I didn't deserve this kind of happiness. But you gave me a chance to become someone better." Ella rested her head on his shoulder, smiling. "And you gave me something to believe in again. A new beginning. Thank you, Julian." They sat in silence, fingers entwined as the moon rose overhead and lavender petals drifted gently in the breeze. The Garden of St. Agnes, once home to sorrow and solitude, had become a sanctuary of love, redemption, and a future written not with regret, but with hope.